and welcome to full council today, 15th of November. Sorry we're a little bit late, just one or two technical difficulties, which hopefully we'll overcome. I'll start with item 1 on our agenda, declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? No? Okay, thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is minutes of previous meeting. Are there any issues around those minutes, please? No? In that case, could I have a proposer for their adoption? Councillor Grottick, seconded Councillor Watt. All those in favour? Thank you very much. They are adopted. Item 3 on our agenda, Chairman's announcements. I have none. Item 4 on our agenda, questions under Standing Order 14. I have none. Reports from committees. We don't have any. Item 6 on our agenda, motions in accordance with Standing Order 12. I have none. And item 7, urgent items. I have none. So we move on now to part 1. Oh yes, I beg your pardon. We do have an urgent item. We were not able to publish at the time of the original agenda, so we have got the update on the corporate plan. So I'd like to hand over to the Chief Executive. Thank you for that one.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. Apologise that the report was a day late, an administrative error on my part, and thanks to the Chairman for allowing it to come. This is a close-down report, if you like, on the previous corporate plan of the Council from 2018 to 2022. And members thought it appropriate that we actually had a formal report come to Council on how well we did or didn't do against the objectives that you set back in 2018. So I'd start by saying that in 2018 you didn't really expect a pandemic to come your way, and therefore it's not surprising that all of the items that you expected to do during that period were complete. But you did make progress against quite a lot of the plans that you laid out. 8 of the objectives were mainly or fully achieved. 11 of them were partially achieved and 2 were not. The 2 that were not were the health and social care integration project that you'll know is still ongoing in terms of our bids to government, and a thorough review of the active SILI programme, both of which have been carried forward into the new corporate plan, which we approved back in February of 2022. I'd like to thank Councillor Marcus for working with me on it and going through the plan and giving our assessment to put before you today to see whether you concur or not in terms of how well we did against those objectives. In closing, Chairman, the last thing I'd say, of course, is in terms of continuous improvement, your new corporate plan was approved in February of 2022. We've taken the opportunity to tighten up a little bit better on the objectives so they're very clear about what you want to achieve, because you'll see in your old corporate plan some of them where there wasn't clear where the end date was going to be, and quite a lot of them are ongoing, such as housing, etc. Alongside your new corporate plan as well, you have a delivery plan now, and you'll see that one of the recommendations is that in order to tighten up performance management arrangements, that delivery plan comes back to February Council each year for you to have a review of, bearing in mind every year, of course, you'll be setting the budget at that time, so you can see whether those objectives for the 3-year period are still achievable or not, or whether any alterations are needed. So that's it, Chairman, just to introduce the fact that was our plan, and perhaps, if you're okay, Councillor Marcus might want to say a few words.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Marcus?
Yeah, just to reiterate what the Chief Executive is saying, and to highlight the importance of Recommendation 2 about monitoring the progress on the new corporate plan, so we can plan and get feedback from officers about what we can achieve for the next year, especially with the current financial situation. It might be at the time to reevaluate all our objectives and what's achievable for the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for all your work on this as well from me, Councillor Marcus. Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Just a quick query, really, on number 2, improve the well-being and life chances of Ireland's young people through ongoing investment in early health services. It actually states it's achieved. But I've got the copy of the Ofsted report that did have concerns about children with special educational needs and those with education and healthcare plans, and then some work had to be done. So therefore, is it achieved?
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
For me, I think that's a problem with the objectives of the old corporate plan. I think it's a very wide objective. It's a bit too wide. We're a bit too... it's an iterative process, and we have got better at highlighting our objectives. So, do you know that?
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, when we went through the plan, it was quite difficult because some of them were sort of open-ended of the objectives that you set back in 2018. So when do you ever get to the end? So in the new corporate plan, we've tried to be very clear about, we would deliver X by Y. So it's very clear what you're going to do. When you looked at sort of children's services and education and SEND and all those sorts of things, it was a broad brush assessment of where the council is as a whole compared to other councils across the country. You'll know how difficult children's services particularly are across the country, and actually overall the Alta City is in a good place. Not saying there's always room for improvement, but you haven't got major areas of intervention required in children's services that you have other parts of the country.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to note for the minute, thanks to the officers for all the work that they did during the COVID pandemic. Set in the context, as the Chief Executive has mentioned, of the global pandemic, we had an incredible amount of pressure on resources, and yet, helped by 28 miles of distance and some sea breezes, I think we had good outcomes for the community, which I'm sure we're all very pleased about. So I do think it's worth just flagging that for the minute, and also flagging the fact that the more robust monitoring of the new corporate plan will be welcomed by us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, in previous conversations with the Chief Executive, we've talked about potentially having an end-of-year scorecard, which we share with the community to highlight some of the successes we've had, but also to highlight some of the areas where improvement is needed. Are we still looking to sort of turn this document into something a bit more public-facing, which we can share with the community?
Yes, I mean, I think also it links to the LGA peer review, which, we just recently considered, where the LGA's view was that we were a little bit reticent in telling the public some of our successes, but quite happy to sort of talk about our failures, if you like. And therefore, in terms of having this annual review period in February of our corporate plan and progress against, I think working alongside members on the comms group, it would be very useful for us to look at what sort of annual report would work best with our local community. So taking that evidence and then turning it into a document that's not blowing your trumpet too much, but is actually factual and saying what you actually achieved, I think would be a good thing and will be one of the recommendations in the LGA peer review.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have two recommendations here. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Marcus, seconded Councillor Grottick. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chief Executive, for that report. We move on now to Part 1, Item 8, which is the Isles of Scilly Fire and Rescue Service Assurance and Review, also introduced by our Chief Executive. Thank you, Paul.
Very briefly before I hand over to Kevin. Morning, Kevin. Good to see you. Members, just to let you aware, the processes for fire and rescue services are slightly different, if you like, from councils. You ought to be aware that we are a dying breed. There are very, very few fire and rescue services that are administered by local authorities across the country. Now, the majority of them are standalone authorities with their own precepting, and that increasingly is the direction of travel, currently being yet again considered by the government in terms of whether to integrate with the police under a police and crime commissioner. That's not yet happened. So we are a little bit unique in terms of our fire and rescue service, but we still have to comply with all the national standards, and we are inspected regularly by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, who have only recently been here, and their report will hopefully be before you either in December or early in the new year after national moderation. But the key plank of any inspection of a fire and rescue service is the integrated risk management plan, which lays out what the fire and rescue service intends to do based on its risk profile over the 3-year period. Members might recall that you agreed to extend your current plan by 1 year, and that was in order that you would get the HMI report before you, in order that if there are any recommendations in that report, you could build them into your new integrated risk management plan. So that will be happening next year. So this is an update report. It's another requirement that you have an annual assurance document, which comes before you as a fire and rescue authority, to give you assurance that the fire and rescue services is complying not only with all the national rules, but is got its mind on its local risk profile and what it's doing in order to mitigate risks across the islands. So it's a very important document. It's very important that you give it due regard as a fire and rescue authority as opposed to the council. And I say that very carefully because that's what the HMI will be expecting you to be operating as. So that's just as an introduction, Sharon. Perhaps if I can hand over to Kevin.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. Morning, Kevin. Thank you.
Morning. Yeah, is any questions from the paper that you've...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bedford?
We will have to email you the questions, Kevin. Did you get them?
Yeah, I've got some questions. So if you're happy to use it, fire away. So in answer to your question, Nita, as far as special services, you were questioning what special services there are. So as a fire service, we don't offer any, in particular, special services. It's a way that we record incidents. So all incidents are recorded on an incident reporting system that go to the Home Office that form national statistics. And as far as, so they're categorised as either fire, false alarms or special services. And special services are anything that are not actually a fire. So it could be a road traffic collision, it could be a hazmat incident, it could be assisting another agency. There's nothing specific that we offer as a fire service that comes under special services. It's just a way that we as a fire service report incidents. The next one that you was asking about is fire alarms. False alarms, apologies. So as far as false alarms are concerned, most of our false alarms would be from unwanted fire signals. So we call them AFAs. So we'll turn up to a property with a fire alarm sounding, and there's not actually a fire, so that would be recorded as a false alarm. But also, we quite often will get called to what we call controlled burns. So somebody will call 999, will get called to an incident where there's a controlled burn, it's under control, it's being managed, but it's recorded as a false alarm. We try to sort of mitigate those calls as much as possible by educating the community to actually report that they're going to have a control burn so that we don't get unnecessary and unwanted calls. And that seems to be working really quite well with social media, etc.
Thank you, Kevin. Another question I didn't write down was the drought this year has been quite considerable, isn't it? The drought and the fear of having bushfires and fires that are out of control. Is there anything in your incident planning that are going to go forward regarding another drought situation like on the Isles of Scilly?
So we're working with Cornwall quite a lot with these sorts of things there. Wildfire is huge. It's a really big subject at the moment. Cornwall are actually looking at new ways of tackling these these issues with new bits of kit and equipment. They're introducing wildfire packs on some of their appliances, and we'll certainly be looking at following suit and introducing them into our service. We've been really fortunate this year that we didn't have many fires, sort of what you might call or deem a wildfire. But we're certainly looking at it. We're really conscious of the water situation, which is key. With the initiative that's currently happening on the islands at the moment with rainwater harvesting, we're working with those people, and where those tanks are being installed, we're making sure that we've got access and that we've got fittings that we can, as a fire service, utilise that water supply if needed, especially in those areas where the hydrant network don't cover.
Thank you. That's really, because I can remember the Gew and the Minutes fire. I can see why the councillors here. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, Kev, I emailed a question again about the age of the equipment on page 6 of the report. The off-island equipment is 30 years old.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in answer to that question, we have had an independent review of all of our vehicles, kit and equipment that was carried out by Cornwall Fire Service, their asset team and their engineering team. And from that, what they produced is a capital replacement programme for us. I think what you're probably referring to with the 30-year-old equipment are the tractors on 3 of the islands. And from the report, what's come from the report is that there's currently nothing on the market that is available to replace what we've currently got in place. The vehicles that are in place are in good condition. We've got a robust service and repair regime in place, so they are kept in really good, top-notch condition. We've been assured that there are parts and spares are readily available for those models. However, we are always looking for replacements. We're going to emergency services shows. We've got people all over the country, really sort of looking out for replacement vehicles when they come available. Like we did with Tresco, their vehicle was aging. It's about the same age. We managed to find a vehicle that was suitable for replacement, and it is now in place. So we've got no concerns about the vehicles or any of the kit and equipment that is currently in service. And from that capital replacement programme, any safety critical kit and equipment has or is being replaced currently.
Thank you. Councillor Grottick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This peer review, especially with similar island locations, sounds really interesting. Have you got a date for that yet, and will you be reporting back on it afterwards, please?
So I was in Cornwall working last week, and we are in the planning stages of when that's going to be. We're hoping that it's going to be in the next couple of months that we can engage. And yes, we will be reporting back.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Oh, yeah, I think a question for Kevin and one for Paul. In terms of meetings I have with officers at the moment, most of the time is spent talking about staff vacancies, housing issues and general staffing capacity pressures. Is that anything you're seeing when you're doing your recruitment, particularly on off-islands, or are we well placed?
I think we're well placed because we are an on-call service. The majority of people applying for these positions have other roles within the community. So the housing isn't an issue for us as a service. Sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Just is recruiting staff and retaining staff, is it a risk for you at the moment, or are you content that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely content. I mean, nationally, we retain staff. Nationally, we retain staff for a lot longer than other services. Got no issues with when we recruit. Yes, some of the off-islands, sometimes we do struggle to recruit, and like Paul alluded to earlier, we do have to meet national standards, which is very difficult sometimes with maybe fitness or medicals or compliance. So That is difficult at times. However, I don't have problems recruiting, and currently we are up to establishment. So, yeah.
And I think my other question was to Paul, when you sort of introduced it, you talked about us being almost unusual now and being a sort of council-led authority. And it seems like the direction of travel is to go in a different way. Is that something we need to give any thought to? Is it something which might be taken out of our hands, or is it just something which we can maintain the status quo?
I think if it happens, it would be taken out of your hands, Councillor. It was in the police and crime bill draft that the government's proposal was that all fire and rescue services would combine with police forces, in effect, under the leadership of the Police and Crime Commissioner. That piece of legislation hasn't gone through. It keeps coming almost to the point and then being pulled back again. So at the moment it's not happening, but it's still a live conversation happening in government about whether or not it would be more efficient for those two bodies to be brought together. Precepting bodies, that's the point. In effect, they're funded through council tax, and therefore maybe the government thinks by bringing those two bodies together there's efficiencies to be had.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any further questions, so we've got a couple of recommendations here on this report. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Guy, seconder. Councillor Rogers, thank you. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Kevin, for all your hard work, as usual. Thank you. We move on now to item 9 on our agenda, which is in the hands of our 1-5 officer, Russ Lashman. It's the second quarter financial performance report. Good morning, Russell. Thank you. Hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Today I'm bringing you the Quarter 2 financial performance report. If we move to page 30 of the pack, you will see that the latest forecast as at the end of Quarter 2 is that we are forecasting the council may have a very small overspend by the end of the year, £13,000 or in the order of £13,000. This is a significant shift since the Quarter 1 report, where we were anticipating and forecasting an underspend in the region of £140,000. Although at that point I did caveat that we did expect the impact of inflation and the economic issues around not just the UK but around the world would start impacting on costs, and I did anticipate that underspend would rapidly disappear and we would be struggling with keeping the forecast as an underspend during the year, and we would probably overspend. Now that we've had longer to look at it, we've got 6 months of data, we are starting to see costs go up, and we are predicting we will have a small overspend. And as I say, there is still uncertainty around that. As we all know, inflation is running at double figures still. There are forecasts that might start coming down, but there's also a lot of political and other activity around the world that might push it the other way. So there is still uncertainty during the year in these forecasts. There's far more uncertainty than we've had in previous years. Some of the reasons for the movement since the first quarter, the pay award now for local government has been settled. The average of that is about a 6% increase in our pay bill. We put in 3% when we did the budget. We upped that to a 4% allowance when we did Q1, but it's turned out to be a 6% total cost. Obviously, it was a fixed sum, which gave people at the lower end of the grade a significant pay award, and those higher up are less significant. But the total cost of our pay bill is 6% more than we had budgeted for. That does start to eat into our budget. It eradicates the contingency that we held, and as I say, is feeding into while we're just starting to overspend. We have had some positive news. that's what you can call it, that the government, in its announcements during the first part of the autumn, removed the national insurance increase, both the employers and the employees. We will get some benefit of that in the last 4 or 5 months of the year, and that will offset some of our overspend. But again, as I say, what happens over the next 4 or 5 months, we're still open to the impact of inflation and other economic uncertainties around the world at the moment. And you know, as we speak, I think if anyone's seen the news, you know, the G20 are meeting, and there is still a significant discussions going on about supply chain issues around the world, the fuel costs around the world. We'd like to think that we're immune to it, but we're not, I'm afraid. And nothing that we can actually address directly, but we just need to be monitoring and ensuring that our own spend is kept tightly under control. There are a number of variances in the report set out in paragraph 2.2. Say we have some staffing pressures in the chief exec's area, and we've had reduced income in the airport and some additional audit costs. The audit costs is something we're not alone in. It's something that the rest of the public sector are suffering. As we know, there's a supply issue in the audit sector which is driving costs up. But the underspend that we did have in people's communities has reduced. We've said previously that was due to the mix of people in Park House driving that in the main. That mix is just starting to change, only starting to change, but our income is beginning to drop. We had a lot of income coming in from South Funders. That is beginning to just drop off slightly, and costs are going up, particularly as we're struggling to fill some of the posts there, and we're using agency staff, which are more expensive. So just as you're probably reading in the press about agency staff, and we're not paying the sort of rates the NHS are paying. I'll give you, before anyone gets too alarmist, we're not paying £2,500 a shift. But we are falling back on the use of agency staff, similar to the NHS. Not to the same extent, but the same issue is beginning to hit our services. The waste services, the cost is going up. New contract prices and changes in the volume of waste, particularly the big waste and less trade waste, so the mix is changing. I think it's a piece of work that we'll need to pick up when we're looking at the budget for future years, of whether there's more work needed to ensure that we get that mix right, that people that should be charged trade waste are being charged. At the moment, we're beginning to see, an increase in the domestic waste stream and the reduction in the trade waste. One piece of better news is we have received additional government grants, which helps offset some of these increases. The net impact over the quarter was £116,000, but we had a significant grant for additional activity in social care, and there's been offset by some small amounts of grant we've had to pay back as those grant schemes have come to their end and we haven't spent all the money. They were very tight conditions, and any underspend has to go back to the government. So the net movement is about 116,000, but positive, and that pulls us back from what would probably be 100,000 overspend, which is what I think I was verbally predicting at the end of Q1, and to just a very small overspend at the moment being forecast for the end of the year. Moving on quickly, we have included, as requested through the performance report, the airport activity in this report now. You can see the passenger numbers are set out there against our forecasts for the year, and slightly behind at the end of Q2, not massively, but behind. But remember, we did significantly reduce the forecast at the beginning of the year from the old forecasts that were used previously. We kept expecting we were going to get 96,000 passengers in the year. We said that those numbers were history. Let's bring in some new ones. We're monitoring against that now. So that hopefully will give us a better set of numbers and better way of monitoring the airport going forward over the next couple of years. Then I'll move through to capital expenditure. That's probably moving on to page 32, 33. Capital programme has been uplifted, and there is a recommendation to uplift it by the 750,000 grant that we had for the Museum and Culture Centre. That's, although known about it, Q1 was embargoed, so we're now adding that into the capital programme formally as we've gone past the embargo stage. The total programme now is just a little over 21 million. The programme runs from 2019 to 2024. And we're anticipating a spend of 8.8 million in this year. It's the latest forecast. You will see then when we get to the table at the top of page 34 that we have a fairly slow start. We've only spent 6%. But I think if you look at a line at the bottom of the blue shaded area, the Climate Adaptation City project is huge in comparison to the rest of our capital programme, and is distorting spend. Very little spend by the end of no spend at the end of Q2 because, as you're aware, we didn't let the contracts until we sorted out the additional funding. Those works have started, the orders are in place, and spend is starting to kick off significantly. And if we do hit that forecast spend of approximately £6 million, it will significantly change that bottom line. The remaining parts of the capital programme are probably on line to spend as we anticipated. It's just distorted as 80% of the capital programme is on one project, and that is all spending in the second half of the year. I'm not going to touch on the major schemes other than the Go EV, and obviously the voucher schemes are both coming to the end of their lives. And now we don't have any financial issues with them currently. Obviously we need to keep those tightly under control as we do run out in those final months of those projects, because that's actually finishing those projects off and getting the final grant claims nailed is always a slight risk. But at the moment we don't see any issues with them financially. As I said, the Climate Adaptation City project is there. It's just starting. I'm not going to go through that. We're probably all aware of the works that are ongoing on the island and the stone, etc., that's being transported over at the moment. The savings were relatively technical and more accounting than they were actually reducing services this year. So therefore they were green at the beginning of the year. They're remaining green, and I don't see that will change, but we're still reporting and monitoring those as it's good practice. Then on the bottom of page 37, council tax collection, just raised this slightly with numbers that we are slightly behind performance target, 60% against a target of 61. But that's generally, I think, quite a good position to be on as we are going. There is this cost of living crisis. We still seem to be maintaining a pretty good level of council tax collection, but again, something we need to think about going forward, whether that will drop off. I've said it a number of times, initially through COVID, now say cost of living with the energy crisis. We do need to be very careful and monitor it very closely, but we do seem to be holding up to pretty good figures considering some of the difficulties people that pay council tax may be experiencing. Business rate collection is doing well. It's supported significantly by the council paying its own business rates. We have to pay business rates on a number of our own properties. We pay that early. That gives the performance pretty good first half year. But I'm still confident we will be okay by the end of the year on that. In terms of water rates, again, quickly just touch on this one. It's a long time since we were the Water Authority, or it certainly feels like that with having the COVID pandemic and everything that's happened since. But we are still trying to collect the outstanding water rates that were there as at the point when we handed over to South West Water. As I said previously, it has been impacted by COVID, by having 2 years where the ability to collect debt through the normal processes through the civil process, the magistrates' courts, etc., has been severely restricted. We are starting that activity, but it is slow. We're targeting some of the larger sums outstanding. We have 100% provision for that sum, so any non-collection won't impact our current financial position, but any collection we do get will be a benefit, will be a plus side. So it won't be negative if we don't collect it, but we can actually get a little bit of upside there if we do collect some of that debt outstanding. But as any of you in business will know, the further you get away from the point of provision, the harder it is to collect the debt. We're now nearly 3 years away from when we use the Water Authority. So people have moved on, people's circumstances have changed. It is not as easy to collect the further you get away from the point of issue. I think housing rent is still going well. The people that are slightly overpaying, doing it through standing order, there's not a lot we can do. If it's direct debit, we could. We've got control, standing order, they have control. If they want to overpay, I'm not going to, there's nothing we can do about it. Sundry debt position is still on target, although the absolute value is increasing, so we just need to ensure that we keep that monitoring on tight now. As I say, as we've come out of COVID, activity is starting to increase. We are beginning to build for higher levels of activity again, so we do need to keep tight control on the level of debt. Payment of invoices, as it has been now for some time, with the change in the way it's measured, we are below target on a regular basis. An area we keep saying we will need to have a look at. Time at the moment is against us to actually follow through some of these. I think it's the idea that how you analyse what is late and isn't late. You go from being slightly over-optimistic about how you measure it to being pessimistic, and we'd probably switch to the pessimistic method at the moment. And we probably need to ensure that people do properly register any invoices that are technically in dispute. I think people don't, therefore any invoices in dispute should come out of the calculation, but if they're not actually identified as at the point of payment that they were disputed invoices, they then turn up as late payments. I'm saying that, I don't think performance is really horrendous. Maybe the way that we measure red and green and amber on these maybe need to look at, but we are still paying all our suppliers. Nearly 90% of suppliers get paid on time, which is, it's not a bad performance, but we want to pay 92% of all suppliers and 95% of local SMEs on time. And in section 12, again, quite detailed tables here. Part of Treasury management, we have to report a mid-year position on the prudential indicators that are set out there, the various changes due to the capital programme, the changes in the level of borrowing that we are doing for the year are all set out there. And to say it's a statutory requirement that we should show those indicators. In the past, we've said the indicators aren't changed. We're actually now publishing them to show that there are little or no change in the main indicators in the year. I think that will bring me to the end of the report. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Russell, for that report. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Russell. Members would be grateful for the usual clear narrative, including messages of challenges ahead. All of us are obviously waiting for the financial statement tomorrow, and then also somewhat anxiously awaiting our government settlement, which will be confirmed in December. Just quickly from the report, I thought it was an interesting comment on page 42 about the complex area of working from home, which obviously can have some challenges. And I think the Chief Executive will be looking together with the other officers at the way our working arrangements will continue, hopefully post-COVID. I would just like to say that members are very mindful of the pressures ongoing, both in the revenue and capital programmes, and budget decisions are continuing. In fact, we had a very helpful workshop yesterday, and we'll be having another one in a couple of weeks. when we've all a little bit more informed about the general financial situation in the country. So thank you again for another good report, Russell, and I think we're all in for some interesting and somewhat challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grottick. Councillor Bedford, please.
It was an observation, really. I noticed in September and the airport figures that the helicopter service is actually twice what it's, the forecast was 750 and it was 1,500. And it actually outdid the Skybus, really. I'm just wondering that's the direction of the travel with the helicopter service. I just wondered why there was such a big jump.
I think, comment on those figures. Beginning of the year, when we put together the budget, we estimated what we thought the activity would be at the airport. As I say, we've run with these figures of 96,000 passengers through the airport for a number of years. We worked with the airport manager to come up with a new set of numbers. I think the helicopter, we haven't got a lot of past experience on how many people would come through on the helicopter, how many would land and disembark at St Mary's, how many would move on Tresco, etc. So was a little bit of the finger in the air there. So I think, you put an estimate in, so we've got something to monitor against. 1 year's worth of data will then help us, I hope, hopefully get a better forecast and a better monitoring next year. So I think some of it is a bit of uncertainty at the beginning of the year, but obviously, the numbers on the helicopter are quite healthy compared with what we were expecting. A little bit of good news.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus, please.
Thanks for the airport numbers. It's good to see that in there. Couple of things. So, capital programme, ignoring the climate adaptation programme, do you think it's achievable? Because there's quite a lot of low spend on those projects. Are we actually going to spend that money?
Climate adaptation, I mean, there is a significant activity that's happening now. There are some very big orders placed.
But I want to decide. It's the other ones I'm interested in. So
the rest of them. I think generally a lot of the activity is in place. If you look at them, the housing work is well spent. I don't know whether we'll spend the money during the winter on the corporate estate. Perhaps that might be an area that we may not spend up to. But a lot of the equipment, I know some of the equipment purchases and the major repairs are ongoing. So I think those will spend up. The airport activity, there's some asset replacements there that will need to be undertaken during the winter months, which I think will catch up. So yes, and we've got the Go EV and the voucher schemes which need to come to an end, and we do need to spend those money in this year to satisfy the grant conditions. So I think they will, no doubt. As always, we're slightly over-optimistic in our forecasts, so they will probably in total fall short.
Yeah.
Again, the problem always is I can't tell you which lines we'll fall short on. We just know generally we probably won't achieve absolutely every single line. As I say, significantly the reason why the 6% looks so poor, if you took out the climate adaptation, it wouldn't look quite so bad.
Yeah.
It's no different than in previous years. Last year we did have quite an accelerated programme in the last quarter and did catch up reasonably, but still behind the forecast. And again, it's not only this authority, it is a issue I always find in many authorities that there's an over-optimistic approach to exactly how much will be spent by the end of the year in capital.
It's also worth noting in the capital that there's an overspend in one of those projects. Water stuff is quite a sizable sum for us, 44 grand. How long are we going to be, considering we're overspent now by 12? How long would that process take to get some of that money back?
Well, we've been pushing now for probably over 12 months to get some of the cases up, registered through various, the small claims court, etc. We're in a long list, a waiting list for a lot of those cases. We've put together them, lawyers are waiting. I think it's an issue that we're going to have to take a view on probably towards the end of this financial year just how much more we will be able to secure. We did have a figure of somewhere around about 80,000 at the point we handed over. So we managed to collect about half of what was due. So the second half is always going to be harder. We've done the letters, we've done the chasing, we've done the nice-ish phone calls. Now needs to follow through on the actions that we do say will happen. Not always in our hand because the backlogs are still there, the courts are still not progressing the claims as quickly as we would like. I don't think we collect the whole 40,000, let's be honest with you. How much, I can't say, but there will be a bit that will be needed, there will be an element written off. That's why we put 100% provision in the accounts in previous years.
Yeah, obviously mindful of issues that everyone's going through as well, personal budgets. The increased energy cost has been built into this year's budget, is that correct? Or
yeah, there are some increases in there in the forecast, which is why some of the corporate properties are beginning to look, while we're moving to an overspend position, there's a significant increase in energy costs on the swimming pool, again, pushing us into an overspend overall. This is what I was speaking to when we got the Q1 report, that we weren't seeing some of those inflationary costs at that point, but we knew we would, and they would come through. We are beginning to see those costs now. Obviously, officers and managers are trying to mitigate those as much as possible by looking at the various tariffs we're on, making sure we secure the government support that we can. But this inflation is starting to hit. Cost bases are going up. Those cost bases will stay up. At that level going forward, I don't see them falling back. So then the resources we got this year, we may have a small overspend by the end of the year. But, we're predicting 13,000 at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if that goes up slightly as we experience more inflation, but nothing we can't cope with the level of resources and reserves we've got. I think going forward, it's the next couple of years where our cost base is going to be significantly higher because of inflation. And I don't see that our income, i.e. our settlement figures from the government, are going to go up at the same rate. So challenges more in future years than we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I echo the Vice Chairman's comments about the quality of the report and added to that the quality of yesterday evening's workshop, which I thought was excellent. I mean, I don't do numbers, I largely do words, but I found it really revealing. But I just wondered if they're going to be available, the slides will be available to members.
Yeah, obviously the workshop was not a public event, but the slides I used will be sent out to the members today.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Looking at the capital programme, I think in the council funding projects, the corporate estate, nearly 500,000, no spend today. I assume there will be some spend in the next 6 months, but this would just roll over into the following year, I assume.
Yeah, we have cut that back from, I think, what we were forecasting earlier in the year, but the manager responsible has given the latest forecasts that they will hit that target. We shall see whether we do actually reach that level, but if we don't, the money does roll forward, but when we're setting next year's budget, we do have the option of whether we think that, but that money by rolling forward means that perhaps we don't have to look at maybe an allocation or a new fresh allocation in 2 years' time or something. Maybe that pot that we set aside originally, as it's drifting year by year, allows us maybe it's an area that we will have to continually invest in. Maybe by the fact that it's slipping slightly, and maybe savings later in the financial strategy.
Well, that was what I meant really. So, when we budgeted for last year, we were in less straitened circumstances than we're going to be next year. So, yeah, you can push it around. And the other one is museum land release. Is there any prospect of that ever jumping above nothing?
don't know whether Nicola wants to answer that. I mean, that's grant that we've received, and we will be spending, whether it's through direct spend. I'll leave that to Nicola.
So you remember we've got some land release funding from government. We could only use that spend on the Old Museum when we're out of our lease arrangements with the Museum Association. So it's time limited, but it's also linked to the legal agreement being released. So depending on what happens with the funding from the new museum will depend on when the museum trustees feel comfortable to release that lease and then allow us to spend on that property. So it's an intricate arrangement at the moment. We're just waiting to see when it's possible to start works because we need the Museum Association's approval to do that. Their approval would be dependent on us getting capital funding for the new project moving forward. So we'd hope to spend the money. We might have to return it if we can't do it in a reasonable time scale, but we've kept the funds up to speed and they are working with us at the moment and understand the situation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicola. I was aware of that, but I do think there's quite a lot of people in the bigger world wondering what on earth is happening with the museum building. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Guy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just for the record, 2.2C, the overspend of 190,000 is just a little alarming, and hopefully we will keep our eye on that, yeah? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I don't have any further people signalling to question Russell, so could I have a proposer, please, to accept his report? Councillor Sims, seconded Councillor Marcus. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. And I would like to add for the quality of your report, as always, Russell. Thank you very much indeed. So we move on to item 10 on our agenda now, which is the terms of reference for the Joint Health and Wellbeing Board, which is in the hands of our monitoring officer, Simon Mansell. Hopefully we can hear you, Simon.
Yeah, can you hear me, members? Hello?
No. Yeah, I think, sorry, Simon, I'll have to hand over to our Chief Executive. We can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I'll do my best, Simon. If you wave if I say something incorrect, I can see you on the screen. So members, you'll recall that the governance arrangements for NHS and social care are under a major period of change at the moment. This new body called the Integrated Care Board has come into being, which meets every month now under an independent chairman, John Gavette, and underneath that is an Integrated Care Partnership. And one of the papers that came to Council some time ago was the issue of health scrutiny and also the issue of the Health and Wellbeing Board and how perhaps those arrangements could be more streamlined in order that we could speak as local authorities with a single voice, particularly when we're working in an integrated system now with our health colleagues. The report today before you is as a result of the fact that it's because of unfortunate circumstances that we're well aware of, be it weather or be it aeroplanes or whatever. There have been a couple of meetings that have not been quora as per the existing terms of reference. And so one of the suggestions which is before you today is that members are still allowed to attend virtually, but of course because of the current legislation would not be able to vote, but that the meeting would still be quora to allow business to continue. To give some context, just to be aware though, the Health and Wellbeing Board is not a body that makes a huge number of decisions on behalf of local government across the country. Its main focus is the health and wellbeing strategy and the approval of that and the annual report of the Director of Public Health. But I know a number of members have raised concerns with me about this report and whether or not this is a way forward that would allow the use of the Isle of Scilly to be properly fed into that debate. I have discussed that with the monitoring officer this morning, and if it is the view of members that they're a little concerned about this report, perhaps there are another couple of ideas that members might consider. The first thing, though, before I get into those, to course, the report, the terms of reference do make it clear that you can have substitutes, named substitutes, and you just need to tell Democratic Services beforehand. So it may well be that colleagues on the mainland could act as substitutes for you. That's already in those drafts. The other areas that I was discussing with the monitoring officer, and whether we should ask for amendments to the current terms of reference to be worked up further by officers, is that if members attending virtually have major concerns about a report being discussed, that there is the ability for members to ask for a deferral of that report, and therefore that report would have to be deferred. And secondly, that members instruct officers to write to the Secretary of State in his new role as the chairman of the Islands Forum to ask for us as an island community and all island communities to have an exemption from the current regulations to allow virtual voting in an island context. The report is, as I said, a result of the fact that 2 meetings of the board have not been able to progress, and there is a recommendation before you, but I have those further thoughts maybe to aid the debate, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Could I ask Councillor Williams, please, to comment? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the mitigation points that the Chief Executive raised then are the right way to explore. The point we've also been bouncing around is we do have a mainland-based member who lives 20 minutes or so away from County Hall. Whether we sort of look at it may, when we reallocate places, to whether he becomes a member of the board as well. It would reduce the likelihood of what's happened to 2 of the last 3 meetings happening again. At the moment, we're in a position where we're wasting time, money, and not making timely decisions. At the last meeting, we were going to be talking about cost of living crisis and winter wellbeing support and things like that. That conversation hasn't taken place, and the Chief Executive is absolutely right that some of the decisions the Health and Wellbeing Board make aren't critical to what we do on a local basis, but it sort of helps just set the geography and also the direction of travel. So at the last time we had a meeting, we had 3 people from Sleadews go across. There was myself, Aisling and Paul Charlie from the Health and Wellbeing Board. Because we were going through different routes, Paul managed to get to the meeting. Aisling and I didn't. So again, he had a complete wasted trip, wasted expenses and things like that. So I think we need to find a way of making sure that the Health and Wellbeing Board can function. I just wanted to offer some reassurance as well. I think the Health and Wellbeing Board partners are really, really receptive to Scilly. Linda Taylor, as chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, couldn't have gone more out of her way to help us. There isn't a them and us situation. We spoke last week about, in our museum meeting, about the need of the trust, and I think we just need to build up that sort of degree of trust. The Health and Wellbeing Board aren't trying to shunt us out or sort of make decisions behind our back. They are fully committed to the challenges we face. They want to help us. They bend over backwards to try and help us. So I think I would like to try and find some sort of solution that allows the business of the Health and Wellbeing Board to continue, but also recognises the sort of factors that Paul has put in place today. So I would like to see us explore membership, avenues of deputies, potentially to the point when we're talking about Mike Nellan's army at point in time. He's living in potentially become a fully fledged member, which would allow someone from Scilly to be there on a more regular basis and reduce some of that risk. But it's probably just a short-term solution. It's not long-term. So I would still like us to proceed with the recommendation today, but with some review process in place so that we can move forward in this current year, but use the next 12 months to come up with potentially a more robust solution that members are more content with. But my early days of the Health and Wellbeing Board, the Joint Health and Wellbeing Board, are that things are working well. The conversations are taking place at the right level with the right people, which was the reason we moved in that direction. Previous Health and Wellbeing Boards weren't. And I think the point that Simon made in his report is also very valid. We need the Director of Public Health to be at the meeting. So even if we'd carried on the process and had our own Health and Wellbeing Board, the fact that the Director of Public Health couldn't get across to us would probably mean we're in exactly the same position. So I'm looking for a pragmatic solution. I totally hear what people are saying about the risks and the arrangements not being ideal and the risks to governance and some of the threats that people perceive. But I think the paper before us is a pragmatic solution. It's not the total answer. I think there are other answers which we could explore.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Williams, for that. Councillor Grottick.
Thank you, Chair. I've given a lot of thought to this report since we had it before us, and I've talked to several colleagues, including Councillor Mumford. I don't know whether or not she'd want to come in because she's attending, obviously, virtually this morning. It's very early days in the new arrangements for the Health and Wellbeing Board, but there is a presumption that the Health and Wellbeing Board will have a greater profile and possibly a greater decision-making ability as the ICS develops. So obviously we've got to monitor it. Colleagues may be comforted by the fact that any material change in service provision must come back to full council for agreement and ratification. That was voted through the Finance Audit and Scrutiny Committee in January of 2017 and is, I think, some comfort. But I would like to suggest a slight tweak to the recommendations that may be helpful. That the amended terms of reference to the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Joint Health and Wellbeing Board, as set out in Appendix 1 of this report, would be approved, but adding until a review of the arrangements is carried out next spring, which I think is actually just stating what is actually going to happen, but I think from the point of view of the minutes that would be useful. And number 2, that the local health and wellbeing group be instigated as agreed as soon as possible, and that the first meeting of that informal group to feed into the Health and Wellbeing Board should take place before the end of the year. I think that might be helpful if colleagues agree.
Thank you. I see you're nodding, Councillor Mumford. I don't know whether we're able to hear you or not. Do you wish to come in?
Can you hear me?
No, unfortunately, our sound problems are scuppering that. But I see you're nodding. Thank you very much, Avril. I would just like to go back to Councillor Williams. Are you in agreement with Councillor Grottick's comments?
I am, and I think her second point about the local group, we had a really, really productive meeting that I was at last week, and Fran and Avril were out talking about the cost of living crisis, and that was a multi-agency group with people from all different agencies. I would see that as being the sort of the starting point of that, and the outcome of that is going to be a sort of roadshow there at the end of this month or early next month to allow people to come in and hear about all the different ways of saving energy and things like that. So for me, that's sort of an outcome which we can take forward, and is a way we can demonstrate that the meetings we take place produce some sort of outcome for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Sims.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also in favour of Councillor Grottick's recommendation. Just refer, I was quite interested in what CEO just said about seeing if we can get some sort of exemption from Ireland for virtual meetings, because the call I just got and tape was from Skybus to say I'm not going to get back tomorrow afternoon, so I'm not going to be able to attend the Economic Prosperity Board tomorrow. Which raises all manner of issues for Fran getting back to the airport and things like that. However, they're not flying anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I mean, keep pushing that one, because it's a real nuisance, and if we can get an exemption, it makes life so much easier, particularly at this time of year, and particularly tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, obviously up for members whether you wish me to or not, but I do sense, and I know the debate nationally is back again about whether or not there should be virtual voting allowed at meetings. Currently, it's focused on the issue of planning. I had heard that from the monitoring officer this morning in terms of national monitoring officer arrangements. So I just wondered whether this was a real live example of when we could bring to the Secretary of State's attention that joint arrangements in the widest sense, so not just the Health and Wellbeing Board, but also, as you say, the Economic Prosperity Board, etc. Islands are going to be disadvantaged because of our very remoteness, and making that point in his new role as the chairman of the Islands Forum may or may not succeed.
Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Do you want to come back in?
Yes, just very quickly. It's like, well, the Economic Prosperity Board tomorrow, if I'm not there and Fran's not there, it's not for it. It's got a lot of work to do, and there's a timeline on it, and, weaponise it.
Councillor Marcus. please.
So with that in mind, can we add in the third recommendation to get the draft letter to be sent to the Secretary of State? So that actually happened. Also, it's really good to hear that the Joint Health and Wellbeing Board is going really well. It's good to hear that everyone's engaged in it. And yeah, we do want it to succeed. Obviously just got to be wary about unintended consequences and starts of journeys that we didn't realise at the time, which is why I think members were so initially took a step back from this. But with the discussions that I've heard and been part of, then I'm more calmer with the proposed arrangements, especially with the review. I just wanted to make sure that we capture those ideas about local deferment of local topics and things like that don't just get lost in the midst of minutes and are actually brought back to the review in the scrutiny committee. Is that right? In 2023, yeah.
Chief Executive.
Just to say, certainly I'm more than happy to, as part of the review that the Vice Chair proposed, make sure that things such as clear on who people can be substitutes, in what arrangements, is it purely members or is it officers as well, for example, and whether a deferral is an option for us, etc., where members online can say, I'm sorry, I don't want this report to go ahead, please defer it to the next meeting, etc. We'll wrap all those up and bring those back to you in that review period that the Vice Chair's laid out.
And it's also worth noting that sometimes technology doesn't work as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, it might be a conversation for the Governance Committee at some point, but agenda item 5, we always look at committee papers, and in the old days, up until last year, our Health and Wellbeing Board would have featured in that. But since we've moved to a combined Health and Wellbeing Board, it doesn't. I just wonder whether it would help join the circle a bit more if some of the combined boards, like the Health and Wellbeing Board, also featured in agenda item 5, so members are able to hear about and see the minutes and be part of that discussion. At the moment, it sort of sits outside of that, which is not helpful, I don't think.
Very good idea. We'll take that up. Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. So we have the recommendations before you, plus 2 further recommendations from Councillor Grottick that you've heard, and a further recommendation from Councillor. Is everybody happy with that, or would you like those recommendations read out again? So in that case, could I have a proposer, please, for the recommendations you have in front of you and the further 3 recommendations? Councillor Sims, seconder, please. Councillor Legg. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Chief Executive, for your input with this. So we move on now to item 11 on our agenda, which is the proposed site disposal land off Jerusalem Terrace. And I'll hand over to Jim Wrigley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the paper you've got in front of you is a proposal to dispose of a small parcel of land which is owned by the council, situated on Jerusalem Terrace. Photos and a plan of the piece of land have been provided in the report. We are aware that there has been some interest in the private sector in this site, and retaining the site in the ownership of the council does not currently fit within any council plans. Members will also be aware that we are commencing a strategic piece of work around the council's estate, but it is nevertheless deemed that this small site does not fit within that strategic piece of work. The decision, therefore, that is being asked for today is whether the council disposes of that site. If a decision is made to dispose of that site, the authority is delegated to the Strategic Director of Place, Economy and Environment to proceed with an open market procedure in consultation with the Section 151 officer. Just to note that there may be elements of this discussion that need to proceed to part 3, and aware of the sound issues we've got with the monitoring officer at the moment, so we'll look for guidance by hand gestures perhaps, whether that is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim Wrigley. Councillor Marcus, please.
Yeah, I think for me, to judge this plan properly, I think I would like it deferred unless I can be given a reason why it needs to be done right now. I like it to be deferred till next month for members to have better, more time to consider the documentation that's been given to us.
Thank you. Director Nicola Simpson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a brief reply. The request has come from the private sector, so we've had private sector interest. So this hasn't come from the service saying let's dispose of this land now. It's a question that was raised earlier in the summer from the private sector asking us to consider the disposal of this site. So a deferral of 1 month, it's another month onto a request that was made in the summer. So I don't think it's critical in terms of timing. What I would say is you don't really need to wait for your corporate estate review because that won't go into this level of detail. But if there are further questions that remain unanswered, then it would be reasonable to take it to the next council if that is necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, I'm sorry, I should have asked you first. Would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've seen the emails that have gone around. I've seen the clamour for this to be deferred and put into part 3. And to be honest, I was a bit surprised. I just thought, in my simple mind, that this little bit of land that's no use to us whatsoever, and there are no plans for us to develop this site ever. It's too complicated, it's too difficult, it's too small. And the fact that the private, that there's been some interest from the private sector to purchase this land, it just seems a no-brainer for me to look into that and see if we can get some money. Just one question for Russell, actually. The capital receipt we would potentially get for that, what could we use that money for, bearing in mind the pressures on the budgets coming up?
Capital receipts generated from disposal of land and assets can be used to fund capital. Cannot be used to fund revenue expenditure, but can be used to fund the capital programme. So it can be used for other investment requirements the council has. Generally, we will pull capital receipts as a corporate source of funding the capital programme, but there's always the ability for the full council, if they so wish, to make a specific recommendation of a capital receipt be held for a very specific reason. I don't see that in the report at the moment. As I say, it can be used to fund future capital requirements of the council.
Okay, thanks, Russell. I mean, my preferred option would be to take this into part 3 and have an open and frank discussion about the options that are on the table and make a decision today. I don't really see the point in deferring it, but I'll out to everyone else now. Thanks.
Okay, we'll consider that. Thank you, Councillor Dean. But we'll just proceed at the moment with questions that we can deal with without going into part 3. So, Councillor Grotett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'd very much like to listen to all my colleagues' points of view, but I would say that if Councillor Marcus would like to make his proposal into a definite recommendation to defer, I would second it. I don't feel I've had the time to really consider all of the aspects of this particular application, given the time and frank detail that we've got at this moment in time. I would also say that unless we can have a proper dialogue with the monitoring officer, when he can respond to our questions and we can have a meaningful dialogue, I think it would be inappropriate to deal with such a sensitive matter when we've actually got a glitch on the IT. So this, for me, would further my absolute request that we defer this application at the moment. Thank you. But obviously to listen to colleagues' comments first.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, please.
I think I'm one of the people that Tim's referring to about the emails, about this. I am sorry, Jim, but this report is really thin. I haven't actually found it acceptable, and that there's thin amount of information in it, and I don't think that the information we were given allows councillors to make the decisions that we have to defend. And one of the things that I still have real problems with are the full photographs that are in this report, none of them are actually of the land in question that are that you're suggesting that we should sell. If I was going to buy a house, I wouldn't want to see the road that the house goes on. I'd actually want to see the land that the house was on. There's actually no photographs of the land in question. So yeah, I do find the report very thin and lacks information, and it lacks for me the level of accountability and transparency that I feel comfortable with to make a decision. And I would support Councillor Marcus's recommendations is to be deferred until we have some more information. I also don't understand why it cannot be discussed at the December strategic asset workshop that we've been asked to attend. It is part of the council asset, and I can't see why this had to be separated out when, as Nicholas says, there is no urgency. You know, someone approached the council in the summer, so as there's no urgency, why can't it wait until we discuss the asset strategy in December? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sims, please.
Thank you. With all due respect to Councillor Dale, that sounds like I'm going to be rude, I'm not. But this, as far as I know, to my recollection, we've never discussed Jerusalem Terrace at all in Council. Now, for some reason, I cannot remember for the life of me why myself, Dan, and Councillor Marcus, we visited the site a couple of years back. It did strike me as that small. I have no idea why we visited it, though. But the thing is that this has just appeared in the reports, and none of us know anything about it. And I'm not pro or against what's happening, but I just feel I need to know more about it, and I'm very happy to support Councillor Marcus's proposal to defer.
Thank you. Councillor Guy. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Endorse all the comments said around the table. I have got a question, local council, I'd like to ask. Are we aware of any covenants, conditions, or rights of way over that said piece of land? And it's not in the report.
So, in fact, we are aware that there's a possibility of some covenants and rights of way of the land, and there may be also some archaeological constraints on the land, but that would all come up as part of the ongoing process. Would this site be taken forward for disposal? Yes, so give that.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, if we do defer, which it seems like the tide is running in that direction, it's the intention that we have some sort of workshop, this conversation between now and then. I don't want to take the debate away from the public forum, but if it's going into part 3 next time, that sort of isn't really relevant. It's just, what are we going to do in the sort of 4 or 5 weeks we defer? That's my point.
Well, we're going to be a bit short-staffed over the next few weeks, but we could take it to informal. Yes, we've got a number of staff living in corporate property. We could also tag it on to the end of the workshop with the consultants, but that consultancy work is around the strategic direction. So we won't go into every single site. We'll be looking at the strategic direction, the general purpose of our buildings. So it won't be necessarily going to that level of detail, but perhaps we could add half an hour on at the end of that workshop on the 6th of December, I think that is.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus.
So shall I propose informally a recommendation to defer this paper next month?
Thank you. And Councillor Grosset, you've seconded that.
I did indeed, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So in that case, can we vote on this, please? We've got a proposer and seconder. All those in favour? Yeah, that's carried. Thank you very much indeed. So that clears up item 11, and that brings us to the end of the meeting. So with that, I will close the meeting. Thank you very much indeed.